Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a world so exhausting, you'll feel tired just listening. The nightly routine of women in the 1700s. Forget bubble baths, 5-step skincare, or scrolling through memes in bed. Tonight, we're talking about a time when your evening ritual was less self-care and more how do I survive until morning without setting myself or my nightcap on fire. If you think getting your kids to brush their teeth is hard, try boiling your own bath water while wearing 3 petticoats and a corset so tight it could hold a family of raccoons. Before we tuck ourselves into this lumpy, suspiciously louse-ridden hay mattress, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from, and if you've ever tried to wrangle 6 children into bed without anyone crying, including yourself. Bonus points if you're listening at 2 a.m. while eating snacks in secret, history's favourite time. Now dim the lights, switch on a fan for some soothing white noise, and get comfortable. Maybe wrap yourself in a blanket that doesn't itch like a sack of angry bees. Let's get curious for a second. Have you ever wondered how long it took to get undressed when your entire outfit involved 17 buttons, 2 ribbons, and an emotional breakdown? Or if women really slept in those giant bonnets? Or if the only thing separating your face from a greasy candle was wishful thinking? Did they dream of running away, or just of getting through the night without tripping over a chamber pot? Congratulations, you've just woken up in a drafty 1700 bedroom. The sheets are scratchy, the air smells faintly of lard, and you have at least 3 chores to do before anyone is allowed to sleep. Good luck. After a day of being trussed up tighter than last year's Christmas goose, it's finally time to get undressed. The only problem? Your nightly striptease involves 3 layers of petticoats, a corset laced like a navel knot, wool stockings rolled tighter than your nerves, and an undergarment charmingly referred to as a shift, which coincidentally is all you'll want to do. Shift out of this nightmare and into pyjamas that haven't been invented yet. Let's set the scene. It's late. The air in your room is somewhere between chilly and should I sleep in my gloves? Your back aches from hours of posture so rigid it would impress a Marine. But you can't just collapse into bed. No. First you must face the ritual of reverse dressing, a process with all the romance of unwrapping a wet cabbage, but twice as time-consuming. You begin by untying the ribbons on your outer petticoat, each one a tiny act of rebellion. The knots have a personal vendetta against your fingers, slipping just out of reach and tightening with the supernatural spite of a toddler refusing to take off their shoes. When at last you peel away the first layer, you realise you're not even close to freedom. There's still another petticoat, and another, each with a memory of spilled soup or coal dust lovingly ground into the fabric. Next comes the corset, a device designed by someone who definitely hated joy. If you're lucky, there's a willing sister, daughter, or long-suffering spouse to help with the laces. Otherwise it's you versus your own contortionist abilities, trying to loosen knots behind your back that were tied 12 hours ago by someone clearly in a rush for vengeance. The laces creak, your arms cramp, and you briefly consider living out the rest of your days as a human sausage. Once the corset gives up its grip, your ribcage expands for the first time since sunrise. It's like suddenly being allowed to inhale after hours of shallow, polite breathing, so as not to burst a seam or betray any feelings of joy. If you're noble, maybe you manage a delicate sigh. If you're anyone else, it's more like a wheeze or the world's quietest victory shout. Now you're down to your stays and shift. Stays are basically the sports bra of the era, only made from materials that make burlap look inviting. You unbutton, unbuckle, and finally peel away a damp layer of linen that smells faintly of the day's sweat, stress, and possibly a hint of sheep from the neighbour's field. Your stockings are next, rolled so tight you're pretty sure they're holding your anxiety in place. Off they come, one at a time, revealing legs with neat impressions of the day's struggles. All the while your hair, meticulously arranged hours ago, begins to unravel from its pins and braids, releasing enough dust and pins to construct a small fort. You yank the last ribbon from your hair, fingers numb, scalp tingling, and mentally award yourself a medal for surviving another day's worth of fashion warfare. And then comes the real treat, the shift. Your one and only nightgown, washed about as often as comets pass overhead. It's thin, worn, and slightly see-through, but it's the closest thing you'll get to comfort. You slip it on, feeling every seam and wondering if this is what luxury feels like. A single, soft barrier between you and the drafty, judgmental night. By the time you're finished, your room looks like a linen explosion, and you're left wondering how getting undressed could take nearly as long as getting dressed. You didn't so much undress as stage a carefully choreographed battle between you and several yards of linen, wool, and existential dread. Modern life might have zippers and elastic waistbands, but tonight, as you finally collapse into your hay-stuffed mattress, skin still tingling from the escape, you can appreciate what true freedom feels like. At least until tomorrow morning, when it's time to do it all again, only backward, with a prayer, a grunt, and a wish that buttons would finally go out of style. Because in the 1700s, bedtime isn't a peaceful retreat, it's the closing ceremony of a marathon nobody asked to run. And as you drift off to sleep, remember, it's only a matter of hours before the petticoats, corset, and chaos call your name again. If you thought stumbling to the bathroom at 2 a.m. was hard, imagine the bathroom is a cold ceramic bowl under your bed. Welcome to the chamber pot, your porcelain nemesis, and the main reason nobody in the 1700s drank water after 7 p.m. Miss the pot? Congratulations, you just invented 18th century carpet cleaning. Now let's talk about what this actually means for you, lying half awake in the dark, wrapped in thin linen, debating whether your bladder or your pride will give out first. There's no hallway light, there's no phone flashlight, there's just you, the faint glow of dying embers from the hearth, and the very real possibility of tripping over a footstool, a sleeping child, or last season's laundry pile. You slide one foot out of bed and immediately regret it. The floor is ice cold, uneven, and textured like it was designed specifically to punish bare feet. You fumble around beneath the bed, fingers brushing dust, straw, and something that might be a sock or might be a mouse. Finally you locate it, the chamber pot, cool to the touch, heavier than expected, judging you silently. Here's the thing no one romanticizes about history: aiming. You squat carefully, trying to maintain balance while half asleep, praying your knees don't buckle at the worst possible moment. There's no ergonomic design here, no soft close lid, just gravity, faith, and the knowledge that if you mess this up, you're the one cleaning it in the morning. And by cleaning, we mean throwing straw on it and pretending it never happened. If you're sharing a room, and you are, this whole operation must be conducted in near total silence. Any clink of ceramic, any shuffle of feet, and suddenly someone stirs. A baby whimpers, a spouse rolls over. Nothing heightens the pressure like an audience that didn't ask to be part of this moment. And then there's the smell. Even an empty chamber pot carries the ghosts of previous nights. It's earthy, it's sharp, it's the scent of regret and poor hydration choices. You hold your breath like it's a competitive sport, completing the task with the speed and focus of someone defusing a bomb in their nightshirt. Once the deed is done, you're not finished. Oh no. Now you have to carefully slide the pot back under the bed without spilling a drop. One wrong angle and you're rethinking every decision that led you to this century. Some households empty the pot immediately, braving the cold night air. Others leave it until morning, which means sleeping peacefully, knowing your mistakes are waiting inches away from your face. And heaven help you if you're staying in a nicer house, where etiquette applies even to bodily functions. Nobler homes might have servants responsible for emptying chamber pots, which sounds luxurious until you realise someone is going to know exactly how hydrated you were last night. Privacy isn't just limited, it's non-existent. Miss the pot entirely, and now you're improvising. A scrap of cloth, some straw, maybe a whispered prayer. You smooth things over as best you can, knowing full well this floor has seen worse, and will see worse again before sunrise. Eventually you crawl back into bed, heart pounding slightly, toes numb, bladder lighter, dignity negotiable. You pull the blanket back up and lie there, wide awake now, replaying the entire event in your head like a courtroom drama. Did it spill? Did anyone notice? Is that smell new, or has it always been like that? Modern bathrooms may be boring, but they don't require courage. This did. And as you finally drift back towards sleep, you take comfort in one small victory. You survived the most dangerous journey of the night without injury, humiliation, or a mop. In the 1700s, that counts as a successful bedtime routine. Your only source of light is a candle perched on a rickety table. The wax drips, the flame wobbles, and at any moment you might set your sleeve, your cat, or your hair on fire. If you're lucky, you make it to bed before the candle burns out, or before your wig does. This is the part of the night where everything slows down and speeds up at the same time. You move carefully, deliberately, because one wrong motion could turn your quiet evening into a full-blown emergency involving screaming, smoke, and a very judgmental neighbour. The candle isn't just light, it's a responsibility. You carry it the way someone today carries a cup of hot coffee across a white carpet, except the coffee can't burn your house down. The flame flickers every time you move, reacting dramatically to even the smallest draft, like it's personally offended by your existence. Shadows stretch and warp across the walls, turning ordinary furniture into lurking threats. That coat on the chair looks suspicious. That pile of laundry feels alive. Congratulations, you've unlocked the medieval horror setting. You tilt the candle slightly to see where you're going, which is exactly what you're not supposed to do. Hot wax drips onto your fingers, instantly reminding you that pain is still very much part of this era. You hiss quietly, shake your hand, and nearly drop the candle. This is how it happens. This is how entire villages disappear from the map. Candles themselves are not elegant objects. They're made of tallow, rendered animal fat, which means they smell faintly like dinner and regret. They smoke. They sputter. They leave greasy residue on everything they touch. And they burn unevenly, melting down one side faster than the other, slowly leaning like they've had a long day too and are ready to give up. As you navigate the room, you're painfully aware of how flammable you are. Linen sleeves, wool skirts, loose hair, maybe a bonnet string dangling dangerously close to the flame. Fire safety has not been invented yet, but fear has, and you're very familiar with it. You keep the candle held out in front of you, arms stiff, posture awkward, hoping nothing brushes past it. If you're especially unlucky, the candle gutters out just as you're halfway across the room. No warning, no dramatic fade, just darkness, complete, swallowing darkness. You freeze instantly because moving now would be reckless. You stand there listening, heart pounding, waiting for your eyes to adjust. They won't. This isn't modern darkness. This is thick, historical darkness. You shuffle forward inch by inch, toes probing the floor like a cautious animal. You stub your foot on something wooden and mutter words that would absolutely concern the local clergy. Somewhere nearby, someone coughs in their sleep. A floorboard creaks. The house settles with a noise that sounds suspiciously like a threat. If you do manage to keep the candle lit, you eventually reach the bed. Now comes the final challenge. Putting the candle out without starting a fire or coating everything in smoke. You can't just blow it out dramatically. That sends sparks flying. Instead, You pinch it, snuff it, or lower it into a holder and pray. The flame dies reluctantly, releasing one last curl of smoke that smells like burned fat and victory. The room goes dark again, but this time it's intentional. You lie back, blinking, letting the blackness settle around you. Somewhere outside, the wind rattles. Inside, the candle cools, wax hardening into strange shapes that will drip again tomorrow night. You survived another encounter with open flame, which in this century is a genuine accomplishment. Modern light switches are boring. They don't test your reflexes or your survival instincts. But tonight, you navigated the dark with nothing but a candle, steady hands, and sheer willpower. And as you pull the covers up and finally close your eyes, you can rest easy knowing you didn't burn the house down. Not tonight anyway. Dental hygiene is a contact sport in the 1700s. If you're upper class, you might scrape your teeth with a burnt stick, dab on some salt and call it a day. For everyone else, brushing is optional, toothaches are inevitable, and bad breath is just part of your natural allure. Let's be clear, this isn't the era of minty toothpaste, electric toothbrushes, or even dental floss. If you're lucky enough to have a few teeth left in your adult years, you've either been very diligent, very rich, or blessed with genetics that should be studied by science. Most people simply accept that their teeth are on a slow, painful march toward oblivion, a process occasionally sped up by the hard, sugar-laden treats that pass for dessert. If you're feeling fancy, you might employ a toothstick, which is exactly what it sounds like. A small twig, often from a tree like birch or hazel, that you chew on until it frays at one end. This becomes your medieval toothbrush, capable of dislodging breadcrumbs, mutton sinew, or whatever else is wedged between your molars. You run this stick over your teeth, up and down, side to side, sometimes with a little bit of wood ash or salt for extra abrasion. Because who needs enamel, really? For the upper crust, there are imported tooth powders. These luxurious concoctions might contain burnt eggshell, charcoal, or even the ground-up remains of cuttlefish. You wet your finger, dip it in the powder, and rub it across your teeth with the hopeful optimism of someone who has never seen a dentist bill. If you're really posh, you rinse with wine, which might disinfect your mouth or just get you tipsy enough to forget about your receding gums. Meanwhile, for the vast majority, oral care is a once-in-a-while affair, if it happens at all. Most people are too busy surviving to worry about plaque. Breath in the 1700s is not so much fresh as it is historic. A heady aroma of onions, ale, and existential dread, all marinated beneath the surface for weeks on end. Toothaches are a regular visitor in every household. There are few things more humbling than a rotting molar at 2 a.m, unless it's a rotting molar and the sudden, desperate need for a chamber pot. Home remedies abound. Clove oil if you can get it, strong spirits if you can't. Some swear by pressing a hot onion to the cheek, others recommend muttering a prayer to St. Apollonia, patron saint of dental pain. The results are predictably mixed. Let's not forget the perils of dental surgery. If you lose a tooth, it's coming out with a pair of pliers, a prayer, and maybe a swig of gin. Dentists, if you can find one, are less medical professional and more enthusiastic hobbyist. The best you can hope for is a quick yank and a clean rag to bite on, while you reconsider every decision that led you to this point. If you're particularly unlucky, you might get a wooden replacement tooth, which is about as comfortable as it sounds and twice as likely to fall out at the dinner table. Through it all, you develop a certain bravado. You grin wide, showing off whatever teeth remain like medals earned in a lifelong battle. You boast about never needing the toothstick, or you share heroic tales of that time you pulled your own molar and lived to tell about it. Dental hygiene is a badge of honour, or at least a badge of survival. And so, as you rinse your mouth with a splash of tepid water, or just wipe your lips on your sleeve, you accept that in the 1700s, a healthy mouth is a fleeting luxury. You blow out the candle, crawl into bed, and remind yourself that history's true survivors are those who can smile, chew, and still laugh at their own breath. Good night, sweet dreams, and may the tooth fairy never see what's under your pillow. Forget fancy facial cleansers. Your nightly skincare routine involves a chipped porcelain bowl of cold water and a linen rag that's seen better centuries. The goal isn't glowing skin, it's just to get the worst of the coal dust off before your pillow inherits it. Now let's set the scene. You're standing at a wobbly wooden washstand. The only mirror in the house is warped, and the water in your bowl is so cold you can see your breath in it. There's a thin crust of ice on top, nature's way of saying, "Are you sure you want to do this?" You steel yourself, roll up your sleeves and prepare to wage war on whatever's settled on your face since sunrise. The process begins with a ritual sigh, followed by a prayer that no one walks in while you're making faces at your own reflection. You grab your linen rag, which is neither soft nor absorbent, and dip it into the freezing water. The sensation is so sharp it's almost spiritual. You slap the rag to your cheeks and try not to yelp. This is not the warm, lavender-scented experience you've seen in period dramas. This is a bracing, involuntary wake-up call, history's original iced coffee. You scrub vigorously, working the rag over every inch of skin, determined to remove the visible grime, the invisible regrets, and hopefully that bit of soup that's been clinging to your chin since dinner. The rag doesn't so much cleanse as it relocates the dirt, smearing it from your forehead to your jawline in new and interesting patterns. You wonder briefly what it would be like to exfoliate with something other than rough linen and personal desperation. Soap is a rare luxury, saved for special occasions or catastrophic spills. If you're lucky, there's a sliver of lye soap nearby, harsh, stinging, and scented faintly of disappointment. Most of the time, water is the only option. It's refreshing if you're feeling optimistic and character building if you're not. After the initial shock wears off, you get into a rhythm. Dip, wring, slap, scrub. The dirt comes away grudgingly, revealing patches of skin that might actually be your natural colour. If you pause to look at your reflection, you'll notice your nose is bright red, your cheeks are glowing, not from health, but from the relentless friction of linen against skin. Modern dermatologists would have a field day. If you're from a wealthier household, you might finish with a dab of rosewater or vinegar, both prized for their mostly imagined ability to prevent wrinkles and banish blemishes. For everyone else, you pat yourself dry with the least dirty corner of your nightshirt and call it good. Any remaining soot is tomorrow's problem. Let's not forget the setting. The only light comes from a guttering candle, or the moon struggling through a smudged window pane. The shadows on your face move eerily as you clean, and you realise with some discomfort that you look exactly as tired as you feel. Family members shuffle behind you, waiting their turn, and the room is filled with the quiet sounds of other people's nighttime ablutions, splashes, sighs, and the occasional curse when someone accidentally elbows the bowl onto the floor. Face washing isn't just a chore, it's an act of survival. Every night you scrub away the day's evidence, soot from the hearth, flour from the kitchen, a streak of dirt from where you pressed your forehead in frustration. It's a moment of private ritual in a world with almost no privacy. As you set the rag aside, hands numb, you know you've done your best. Your skin might not be radiant, but at least you won't leave a perfect imprint of your face on the pillow. You crawl into bed, cheeks tingling from cold and exertion, comforted by the knowledge that even if tomorrow is just as dirty, you'll face it with the cleanest face in the house. In the 1700s, that's what counts as self-care, a splash, a scrub, and the courage to greet the next day, coal dust and all. Hair in the 1700s is a full-time job. Before sleep, you brush, braid, and cover your head with a linen cap designed to keep lice in, or out. Either way, you wake up looking like you fought a small animal and lost. Let's talk about the nightly hair ritual, a production so elaborate it makes modern bedtime routines look like child's play. Forget silk pillowcases and leave-in conditioner. Here, your tools are a wooden brush, an inherited comb with 2 missing teeth, and an optimism bordering on delusion. If you have daughters, sisters, or a mother in the same room, you're about to form a hair braiding assembly line worthy of its own union. You start by taking down the day's hairstyle, which has been constructed with the architectural precision of a cathedral and the pain tolerance of a medieval martyr. First, you pull out pins and ribbons, each one holding back a potential avalanche of frizz and dust. As you work, you try to remember the last time you washed your hair, but the memories fade into a haze of lye soap and tears. Washing is an ordeal requiring buckets, strong arms, and a recovery period of 3 to 5 business days. With the structure dismantled, you begin brushing. Slowly, methodically, you work through knots the size of small rodents, wincing at every snag. There's a peculiar skill to detangling hair without making a sound, especially when siblings and spouses are already trying to sleep. If someone groans, you brush quieter, cursing the day you envied those portraits of ladies with elaborate curls. The brush is old, the bristles stiff, and you're never sure if the scratching sound is coming from the brush or something actually living in your hair. Braiding is next, a task as much about survival as style. You divide your hair into sections, twisting and folding with the muscle memory of generations. Braids serve a triple purpose. They keep hair from tangling overnight, they discourage the local population of lice, and they signal to the world that you have in fact tried. For some, it's a single, thick plait down the back. For others, it's 2 or 3 tight braids, tucked neatly under a cap. If you're young or unlucky, your mother might opt for rag curls, tying strips of cloth in your hair to give you bouncy waves by morning. Spoiler, you will not thank her for this. Now comes the crowning glory, the nightcap, a square of linen gathered with a bit of ribbon, designed to keep everything in place and discourage lice from taking a midnight stroll. The cap is both protective gear and fashion statement. In theory, it traps loose hairs and prevents breakage. In practice, it slides off at 3 a.m., tangling itself around your neck and making you question every life choice. The look is not flattering. Think eccentric mushroom with a touch of escaped farm animal. If you're wealthy, your cap is trimmed with lace. If you're not, it's just a rectangle of whatever fabric you could rescue from last season's sheets. Either way, you wake up with lines creased across your forehead and cheeks, the unmistakable signature of a 1700s pillow fight you lost in your sleep. Throughout this process, you battle the real enemy, lice. These unwelcome house guests are a fact of life, not a mark of shame. You inspect scalps under the candlelight, pick at suspicious nits, and sigh with resignation. If things get desperate, it's time for herbal rinses, strong-smelling oils, or, worst of all, a haircut. For many women, hair is their pride and a symbol of status, but after an hour with a lice comb, you'd trade it all for a crew cut and a nap. By the end of it all, you crawl into bed, cap askew, hair contained but defiant, and make a silent wish that tomorrow's tangles will be fewer. You close your eyes knowing that you've upheld the nightly ritual, not out of vanity, but out of necessity, tradition, and the faint hope that one day bedhead will finally become fashionable. And when you wake up looking like you survived a brawl with a family cat, just remember, in the 1700s, a good night's sleep is measured not by style, but by how much hair you still have left on your head. Sweet dreams and good luck. Your next hair battle starts at sunrise. Changing into your night shift means swapping out one set of itchy, sweat-soaked linen for another. The fabric is stiff, the seams are scratchy, and nothing says sweet dreams like wondering if your nightdress was laundered this season or last. Night clothes in the 1700s are not about comfort. They're about necessity and, sometimes, denial. You start the transition by peeling off your day dress, every button and tie a mini challenge for your tired fingers. Underneath, you reveal yet another layer, your petticoat, which at this point could probably stand up on its own from sheer determination. Finally, there it is, the shift. It's supposed to be your clean layer, but clean is a relative term. If it smells less like the barnyard and more like boiled starch, you're winning. You hesitate for a moment, staring at the nightdress laid out at the foot of the bed. Is it the same one you wore yesterday? Or last week? Does it matter? If you're lucky, someone boiled the laundry recently and you have the privilege of slipping into a shift that only smells faintly of lye and hard work. If not, you simply shake out the dust, brush off any suspicious stains, and hope that any lurking insects are too tired to put up a fight tonight. Pulling the shift over your head is like donning a potato sack with delusions of grandeur. The linen is sturdy, but soft is a word it has never heard. The seams rub in all the wrong places, scratching your arms and neck. For an extra dash of nightly excitement, the threads have started to unravel on one side, so you spend a few minutes hunting for that loose bit and debating whether you should just bite it off or wait until morning to tell someone with better sewing skills. The fit is, at best, generous, and at worst, optimistic. Night clothes are not made to flatter. They're made to allow you to breathe. Barely. If you're part of a large family, your night shift might be a hand-me-down from an older sister, your aunt, or someone whose memory you honour every time the collar tickles your nose. You try to ignore the faint initials stitched at the hem, and the even fainter sense of history that comes with it. Once you're bundled into your nightdress, it's time for the layers game. If it's winter, you add another shirt, maybe a woolen wrapper or two. If you're really living it up, you pile on a patched-up shawl for good measure. Every layer comes with its own unique brand of itchiness, as though the fabric itself is offended you're trying to get comfortable. Linen, wool and flannel join forces to ensure that no square inch of skin escapes unscathed. And then there are the accessories. You might tie a scarf around your neck to keep the drafts out, or wrap a spare apron around your waist, because for some reason your midsection is always the first to freeze. If you're in a particularly cold region, you might even wear your stockings to bed, held up by fraying garters that threaten to cut off circulation just as you're about to drift off. Let's not forget the psychological itch, the nagging feeling that something is crawling along your back. You reach behind you, scratching through 3 layers, convinced that you've picked up a stray flea or two during the nightly scramble. After all, nothing says authentic historical experience quite like a midnight bug hunt. Finally, you settle into bed, shuffling and wriggling to find a patch of fabric that doesn't make you want to leap right out of your skin. It's not glamorous, it's not luxurious, but it's yours. As you close your eyes, you remind yourself, real comfort is overrated, and there's a certain pride in surviving another night wrapped in linen and endurance. Because in the 1700s, sweet dreams are mostly a state of mind and a scratchy, itchy badge of honour. Before bed, it's time for a family lice check, because nothing brings people together like communal grooming. The winner gets the satisfaction of knowing their scalp might not itch for about an hour. Welcome to the most intimate and democratic of 1700s rituals, the Great Nightly Lice Patrol. If you ever wondered how people bonded before TV and board games, the answer is simple, by hunting for parasites in each other's hair with single-minded determination. It's equal parts necessity and absurdity, and tonight it's your turn under the candlelight. It starts innocently enough. Someone scratches their head just a little too thoughtfully. Eyes narrow, suspicions are raised, and soon the entire household is roped into a lineup, shoulders hunched waiting for the call of next. The youngest are usually the first to be examined, squirming and pouting while an older sibling or parent parts their hair with a wooden comb, searching for the telltale white specks of eggs. If you're lucky, the only thing living on your scalp is a vague sense of dignity. The process is less delicate spa treatment and more like a forensic investigation. You lean in close, squinting in the dim candlelight, running fingers and combs through tangles, murmuring reassurances or, let's be honest, thinly veiled threats about what will happen if you don't hold still. The combs themselves are hand-me-downs, old, missing teeth, but never short on character. Sometimes, for extra motivation, someone recounts the story of that one cousin who lost half her hair to a lice outbreak, which is only slightly exaggerated for dramatic effect. The real excitement is when someone finds something. There's a triumphant aha, and suddenly you're all peering at a tiny wriggling offender. The unlucky host gets a dab of strong-smelling herbal oil or vinegar on the spot, a solution as likely to repel lice as to clear your sinuses for the next decade. In more dire cases, the nighty comb comes out, scraping the scalp with all the subtlety of a rusty rake. You sit there, eyes watering, trying not to yelp as generations of family expertise are deployed to evict your unwelcome tenants. The tools of the trade are as charming as they are crude. Vinegar, rosemary water, and various homebrewed concoctions stand at the ready in chipped jars. Sometimes it's as simple as squashing the lice between fingernails, a satisfying, if slightly horrifying sound. The whole scene is lit by a guttering candle, casting monstrous shadows and making everyone look like they're about to confess to a crime. Of course there are rules of lice patrol. Don't complain, don't flinch, and don't even think about skipping your turn. Solidarity is key. If one person's infested, you're all at risk. There's a sense of grim camaraderie. If you've survived a lice outbreak together, you can survive anything. Some families even make a game out of it, awarding points for the biggest louse found or for the cleanest head of hair. The only prize really is temporary relief and the faint hope of a peaceful night. And then there's the aftermath. You sweep the evidence into the hearth, scrub your hands with lye soap, and swap horror stories of outbreaks past. Everyone feels itchy, even if they were lice-free, and a wave of nervous scratching sweeps through the room like a contagious dance. Finally, the family disperses, scalps tingling with the sting of vinegar and mutual suspicion. You slip into bed, hair damp, scalp sore, but with the comforting knowledge that for tonight at least you did your part in the endless war against lice. Of all the nightly routines in the 1700s, this is the one you'll remember most because nothing says goodnight like a shared sense of mild humiliation and the hope for an itch-free tomorrow. Sleep tight, and if you feel something crawling, well, just pretend it's the wind. Walls are thin, beds are shared, and personal space is a myth. Goodnight kisses go out to siblings, children, grandparents, and at least one neighbour who just won't go home. Privacy, maybe next century. The nightly goodnight ritual in a 1700s household is less peaceful winding down and more coordinated chaos. In a world where rooms are separated by little more than a wish and a curtain, the concept of a private bedtime is about as realistic as indoor plumbing. You can hear every sigh, every yawn, and every whispered conversation, often whether you want to or not. Your lullaby tonight, the soothing, overlapping chorus of your entire extended family, wrapping up their day at the exact same time. First, there's the bed situation. If you're lucky, you share with only one or two people. If you're not, you're wedged between a rotating cast of relatives, siblings on one side, a cousin or two on the other, and someone's feet always suspiciously close to your face. Beds are not yours, they're ours. Even the family dog seems to have staked a claim to the footboard, and the family cat has decided your chest is the ideal mattress. Try rolling over, and you risk waking half the house, or at least starting a heated debate over blanket ownership. The actual saying of good nights is an exercise in patience, negotiation, and acrobatics. You twist and turn to bestow a kiss on a squirming child, dodge a sneeze from your snoring uncle, and then reach across a pile of elbows to ruffle your youngest sibling's hair. There's always one relative who insists on an extended bedtime prayer, another who can't resist a last-minute story, and a toddler who uses the opportunity to ask every question they forgot during the day. Why is the moon round? Will I have to do chores tomorrow? Did you kill all the lice? If you're a parent, you're still making the rounds long after the first good night. You tuck in small bodies, settle squabbles over pillow territory, and make half-hearted promises that yes, you'll get up if anyone hears a mouse in the pantry. Grandparents dispense wisdom, sometimes requested, sometimes not, and there's always an awkward shuffle as someone tries to reclaim the good corner of the mattress before the lights go out. In the background, the neighbour lingers by the door, ostensibly for one last chat, but really just because their own house is colder and less lively. They hover, cup of something lukewarm in hand, offering unsolicited advice and a running commentary on your housekeeping. You politely hint at your growing exhaustion, but hospitality is a social contract with no clear endpoint. Eventually you resign yourself to one more round of polite nodding and feigned interest before the neighbour shuffles home. The lack of privacy means every sound, every cough, and every snort is community property. There are no secrets after sunset. If you roll over and the bed creaks, everyone knows. If you mutter a complaint, it's heard by 3 generations and probably makes its way into family legend by morning. Even the walls seem to gossip, passing on your midnight grumblings to anyone who'll listen. Still, despite the crowding and the constant proximity, there's a strange comfort in this togetherness. Good nights are loud, chaotic, and sometimes frustrating, but they're also proof that you're not facing the world alone. Surrounded by snoring, mumbling, and the ever-present shuffle of shared blankets, you realize that the greatest luxury of all isn't privacy, it's community. As you finally settle, pressed between your family and the familiar scent of old linen and lived-in warmth, you let the chorus of good nights and don't hog the blanket lull you into sleep. Privacy can wait. For now you drift off cocooned by the messy, noisy love of the people you call home, and in a world without secrets or silence, maybe that's exactly what you need to make it through the night. Locking up for the night is more ritual than reassurance. You bar the doors, wedge the windows, and pray the neighbour's dog is in a generous mood. Burglars, ghosts, and slightly aggressive chickens await outside. In the 1700s, home security system means exactly what you can hammer, wedge, or pile in front of your door before bed. The ritual begins as twilight fades, signalling that it's time to transform your humble home into a fortress, albeit one that creaks, leaks, and can be defeated by a determined goose. Every member of the family has a part to play. Someone draws the shutters tight, someone else slides the heavy wooden bar across the door, and the youngest, if they're unlucky, gets sent to check the latch on the back shed. It's not so much a coordinated effort as a nightly scramble. The doors themselves are marvels of good enough. Hinges groan like old men, the latch wiggles, and the locking bar is a splintery relic passed down for generations. You fit it into place with a satisfying thud, testing it twice, and then once more, just in case. Maybe you push a stool or a sack of grain up against the door for extra security. Not because it would actually stop an intruder, but because it makes you feel clever. Windows are next. Each is a potential entry point for a burglar, a witch, or, more realistically, a freezing draft. You wedge wooden sticks under the sash or hang old rags over the cracks. Sometimes you nail up a bit of leftover hide to block the cold and keep out prying eyes. If you're lucky, your windows are too small for anything but a determined squirrel. If you're unlucky, you'll be patching a new hole by spring. With the house officially locked, it's time to trust in the real security system, the neighbour's dog. The dog is neither yours nor particularly loyal, but it takes its job as local alarm system very seriously. Every creak, every breeze, Every chicken sneezing in its sleep is met with a symphony of barking, howling, and the occasional snarling match with a passing hedgehog. The dog's standards are questionable, but its enthusiasm is unmatched. Not to be outdone, your own animals have their own version of night watch. Chickens cluck anxiously in the coop, geese glare suspiciously from their pen, and the family cat stalks the shadows, presumably defending you from imaginary threats and the occasional real mouse. The pig, unbothered by security concerns, simply lies in the mud and dreams of breakfast. The truth is, most threats to your home aren't people at all. A gust of wind can blow the shutters open. A determined rat can chew through almost anything. And then there's the supernatural, those age-old fears passed down in whispers after dark. Grandmother warns of witches who slip through keyholes and ghosts who drift through cracks in the wattle and daub. So you sprinkle a pinch of salt near the door, hang a protective charm over the hearth, and recite a bedtime prayer just in case the spirits are listening. Once every bar is set and every window wedged, you make a final round, snuffing out candles, double-checking that the fire is banked, and peering out into the night one last time. The world outside is silent, or at least as silent as it ever gets. Somewhere a fox barks, the wind rattles the eaves, and the neighbour's dog launches into another performance. You draw your shawl tighter and hope that tonight nothing braver than a moth tries to enter. Securing the home doesn't actually guarantee safety, but it's a ritual that brings a sense of order to the chaos of the world. It's a reminder that you've done everything you can, with what little you have, to keep your family safe from whatever lurks in the darkness. As you finally climb into bed, the familiar sounds of the barred door and barking dog lull you towards sleep. Tomorrow, the same bolts, bars, and brave barks will greet you with the dawn, and you'll do it all again, because in the 1700s, peace of mind is less about certainty and more about tradition, superstition, and a healthy respect for very loud dogs. The fire must be banked for the night, or you'll wake up colder than your ex's heart. Pile on the ash, whisper a prayer, and hope the last ember survives till morning. If not, tomorrow starts with begging your neighbour for a spark. In the 1700s, your fireplace isn't just decor, it's survival itself. The hearth is the very heart of the home, pumping out precious warmth, light, and hope against the endless night. But fire doesn't keep itself alive. Every evening, as shadows creep up the walls and the last light fades from the windows, you're called to perform the nightly ritual, tending to the fire like it's a needy, smoke-breathing child. This is no simple turn down the thermostat. First, you poke and prod the glowing logs, raking out the day's ashes and coaxing the embers to one side. If you're lucky, you spot a few healthy coals, small, glowing survivors of the day's battles against soup spills and drafty doors. If you're not lucky, the whole hearth is a graveyard, and your evening will soon be spent pleading with a stubborn flint and the universe at large. Next comes the banking, a process that sounds much more official than it feels. You layer fresh ashes over the coals, creating a smothering blanket to hold the heat. Some say use dry ash, some insist a touch of dampness is better. Everyone claims their grandmother's method is best. The goal is to tuck those embers in for the night so they'll still be alive when the rooster starts bragging at sunrise. Of course, the fire is finicky. Bank it too tightly, and you'll smother it. Not enough, and it'll burn out before you've finished your prayers. All the while you're hunched over the hearth, hands smudged with ash, hair full of the scent of burnt wood and stubbornness, performing a delicate dance between combustion and extinction. Once the ashes are just right, you give the embers a gentle poke, whisper a little, "Please stay alive," and settle back with a hopeful heart. But the work isn't done. Someone is always on ember patrol. In bigger families, it's a rotating job. Grandparents take the first shift, insisting they sleep better next to the fire anyway. Children are next, prodded awake if the wind howls or the coals start to dim. Nobody wants to be the one responsible for letting the fire die. Failure means freezing, grumbling, and a desperate early morning trip to the neighbour's house for a borrowed coal. Sometimes, even your best efforts aren't enough. You wake before dawn to a cold hearth, the last ember snuffed out by a sneaky draught. The house is an icebox. Everyone's breath puffs in the air. In these moments, your only option is to wrap yourself in a shawl, trudge across the yard in your slippers, and knock sheepishly on your neighbour's door. Maybe they'll grumble, maybe they'll gossip, but they'll usually spare you a glowing ember or two, because everyone knows it could just as easily be them next time. There's a camaraderie in this nightly dance with the hearth. You share tips, swap stories of disastrous bankings past, and compare notes on whose fire lasted the longest. Every successful morning, you celebrate with a bit of pride. Another night survived, another small victory against the cold. So tonight, as you settle into bed with the gentle crackle of the hearth fading behind you, know that the fire is doing its quiet, unseen work, just as you did yours. You're not just fighting the cold, you're upholding a tradition, staving off the night, and keeping the ancient promise that the hearth never sleeps. Not as long as there's hope, ash, and a bit of stubbornness left in the house. A sprig of lavender, a dried orange peel, or whatever herb you can steal from the kitchen. Tuck it into your pillow and dream of a world where things don't always smell like turnip soup and wet wool. Scent is the luxury of the 1700s, a fleeting and highly suspicious visitor in a world where the dominant fragrances are wood smoke, unwashed linen, and the vague, ever-present tang of livestock. So you cling to your sachet, the closest thing to aromatherapy you'll ever know. Some nights, it's a brittle bundle of lavender from the garden. Other times, the rinds of last winter's oranges, dried on the hearth and stuffed into a small linen pouch. You hold it to your nose, shut your eyes, and let your mind drift somewhere far, far away from the stables. The sachet is more than just a defense mechanism. It's an act of quiet rebellion against your environment. You craft it with whatever's on hand. Dried mint from the kitchen, rose petals saved from a rare summer bloom, or a handful of sage snuck out from the stew pot. Sometimes, in the dead of winter, the only thing available is a pine needle or two, but you tuck them in anyway, hoping for magic. Every addition is a memory, a fragrant scrapbook you press to your cheek as you settle into bed. To prepare for sleep, you shake out your hay-filled pillow, releasing a fine mist of dust and, if you're lucky, only dust. Slip the sachet into the case and try to ignore the reality of your situation. Maybe tonight, your dreams will be scented with citrus instead of last week's stew. You fluff the pillow, nestle your head in, and let yourself be transported by imagination. Because let's be honest, there's no real escape from the smells of 18th century life, only moments of fragrant relief. The sachet serves another more practical purpose. It's rumoured to ward off moths, fleas, and the dreaded bedbugs, history's least welcome sleepover guests. There's no scientific proof, but who are you to argue with centuries of desperate trial and error? You believe, because believing is the only thing standing between you and a midnight itch attack. If you're feeling particularly hopeful, you make a second sachet and tuck it into your nightdress drawer, praying that it outsmells whatever lurks within. The importance of the scented sachet grows in direct proportion to the size of your household. When you share a bed or a room with 3 siblings, a cousin and an aunt who swears by onion poultices, the difference between pleasant dreams and a sleepless night can be the faintest whiff of lavender. You might even catch a sibling trying to swipe your sachet for themselves, sparking a pillow fight that smells significantly better than the usual barnyard brawl. Not every night is a victory. Some nights, your sachet is overpowered by the unmistakable aroma of wet wool drying by the fire, or the ever-present eau de chambre pot. You clutch the pouch tighter, inhale deeply, and remind yourself that somewhere, far away, there is a world where people sleep on clean linen and wake to the scent of fresh bread. For now, you settle for what you have, a tiny pillow of defiance, hope, and floral optimism. As you finally drift off, sachet cradled near your cheek, you know you'll wake to the same old smells tomorrow. But for a few sweet hours, your mind is free to wander through lavender fields and orange groves. In the 1700s, that's the closest thing to luxury there is. A night spent dreaming of freshness, protected by the thin, fragrant armour of your homemade sachet. Your bed isn't so much a mattress as it is a lumpy sack of hay, feathers, or anything that can be stuffed in there and ignored. You fluff, shake, and rearrange, hoping to avoid last night's mysterious lump or worse, tonight's mouse. Welcome to the nightly exercise program known as fluffing the mattress, a tradition less about comfort and more about basic survival. In the 1700s, the line between bed and livestock bedding is paper thin. You begin by peeling back your sheet, which has collected a fine patina of dust and the unmistakable imprint of a heavy sleep. Beneath it lies your true opponent, the mattress, or, as it's sometimes known, the great lump. The stuffing of your mattress is a carefully curated mix of whatever's available: straw from the last harvest, feathers from the loudest chickens, and rags that no longer pass as clothing. Over time, these materials shift and settle with all the grace of a landslide. Each night you're confronted by a new topography, peaks, valleys, and the occasional suspicious ridge that moves when you press it. There's always the hope that tonight's mountain is only a clump of hay, not a lost sock or, heaven forbid, a living, breathing tenant. Fluffing the mattress is part art, part sport. You grab both ends and give it a mighty shake, which sends clouds of ancient dust and memories wafting into the candlelight. The process is loud enough to wake the neighbour's dog and thorough enough to reveal half of last week's lost belongings. Coins, buttons, pins, and the odd breadcrumb emerge like archaeological treasures. You pause to consider which ones to keep and which are best consigned to history and the floor. If you're particularly ambitious, you open up the seam, usually just a clumsy stitch holding the mattress together, and redistribute the stuffing. Feathers are prized but rare. Most of them have migrated to one side or worked their way out entirely, only to be found months later clinging to your nightgown. If you're lucky, your mattress contains more straw than mouse, and the straw is only mildly damp. If you're unlucky, well, let's just say you learn to sleep around certain corners. The mattress is never quite the right shape. It sags in the middle, bulges at the edge, and every so often there's a sharp stick or stubborn quill lying in ambush. You try to smooth it all flat, but it's a losing battle. Eventually you resign yourself to fate, piling up a few extra rags as makeshift padding, making a mental note to plead for new straw next market day. If you're wealthy, you might have a feather bed, soft, warm, and the subject of envy throughout the village. If you're not, your consolation is the slightly rustic, earthy smell that lets you know you're sleeping close to the land, sometimes very, very close. Bedtime becomes a strategic operation. You settle into the mattress, testing each spot for hidden surprises. You gingerly press down on the bulges, hoping nothing wriggles in response. Then you wiggle around, negotiating space with siblings, pets, and whatever else calls your mattress home tonight. The entire performance is accompanied by a symphony of crunching, squeaking, and the occasional suspicious rustle from deep within. Despite its many faults, there's a certain pride in maintaining your straw mattress. It's patched and mended, fluffed and fussed over, and every spring it's completely gutted and refilled in a grand, sneeze-inducing ritual. You complain, but secretly it's yours. The backdrop to whispered stories, midnight giggles, and the stubborn belief that tomorrow's fluffing will finally yield the perfect nest. And so, as you finally settle into your custom-shaped mattress, embracing the lumps, ignoring the squeaks, and shooing away tonight's mouse, You close your eyes and let out a tired, resigned sigh. Comfort in the 1700s is a moving target, but with enough fluffing, a pinch of straw, and a bit of hope, you just might catch a little of it before morning. Time for nightly prayers, ask for protection, good dreams, and if it's not too much, fewer fleas. Promise to be kinder, to gossip less, and maybe to wash your feet more often. No guarantees. As the final embers in the hearth fade and the night presses close, you kneel by your straw-stuffed mattress, or wherever you've carved out a bit of space for yourself, and prepare to have a word with the powers that be. This isn't just about piety or habit. It's insurance. If ever there was a time to hedge your bets, it's right before you surrender to the unpredictable world of sleep in the 1700s. Your nightly prayer is a patchwork of gratitude, anxiety, and negotiation. You bow your head, fingers laced tight, and run through the day's greatest hits. Thank you for the bread, the roof, the stubborn cow, and the fact that Uncle Jeff's cold hasn't taken us all out yet. The list continues. Small mercies that, on bad days, are all that keep you from losing hope. But let's be honest. Tonight you're also here to make requests. You begin with the basics. Please, let the roof hold through the rain. Please, let the fire stay lit until dawn. Please, please, just one night without stepping on something alive. You ask for safety for the children, patience for yourself, and that small but important favour. Could the neighbour's rooster maybe sleep in tomorrow? Just once. Miracles, after all, come in many forms. As you kneel in the flickering candlelight, you reflect on your day. This is the time for self-improvement promises you know you probably won't keep. You swear you'll gossip less about Mrs. Alder's bread, ignore your sister's snoring, and only grumble about chores every other day. You even consider briefly resolving to change your shift more than once a week, but some prayers are too ambitious even for the heavens. There's something both comforting and humbling in the routine. You know that almost everyone in your village is doing the same thing at this very moment, kneeling, whispering, bargaining with whatever saints or spirits might be listening. For the children, prayers are simple. Please make the nightmares go away. For the elders, they're weighty. Watch over those who come after me. For you, it's a mixture of the two, wrapped in the hope that tomorrow will bring less chaos, fewer blisters, and ideally some surprise pie. You pause to offer up special requests. If someone is sick, you mention them by name. If a neighbour is struggling, you send a little goodwill their way, even if you were just arguing over fence posts an hour ago. You even spare a thought for the chickens. You never know who's listening, and you can't be too careful when it comes to breakfast security. Of course, prayer in the 1700s isn't all solemnity. You bargain, you joke, you sneak in a plea for good weather or an unexpected holiday. Sometimes you vent. If you could just do something about the fleas, I'd be eternally grateful. Also, if it's not too much trouble, maybe fewer chores on market day. It's an odd comfort to believe that someone, anyone, is keeping track of your running list of demands and apologies. When you're done, you cross yourself or simply exhale, feeling lighter. The burdens of the day seem a little less heavy, the darkness outside a little less menacing. You climb into bed, heart calmed by the familiar cadence of whispered hopes. You know, deep down, that tomorrow you'll break at least half of your promises, but that's what tomorrow night's prayers are for. And so, nestled in scratchy linen and wrapped in the quiet warmth of 1,000 nightly bargains, you drift towards sleep. In the 1700s, faith isn't just a comfort, it's a ritual, a routine, and the gentle glue that holds the chaos together, at least until morning. You finally drift off, serenaded by an orchestra of snoring relatives, whimpering dogs, and the occasional midnight chicken. Earplugs haven't been invented, so you improvise with a pillow and a strong sense of resignation. Welcome to the musical wonderland that is communal sleeping in the 1700s. Beds are a shared asset, so forget the fantasy of sprawling across a king-sized mattress in blissful silence. Here, you wedge yourself in between siblings, a cousin who sweats in their sleep, and at least one animal whose presence is both comforting and deeply questionable. If you're lucky, you get an outer edge, more fresh air, but also more drafts. If not, you're mashed into the centre, sandwiched between generations, knees to ribs, elbows to cheeks. The night begins with the best of intentions. Everyone go to sleep, someone says. There's shuffling, whispers, and the urgent need to negotiate blanket territory. Within minutes, the first snores erupt, low, rumbling, and with the regularity of a grandfather clock. It's never just one snorer either. The entire room seems to join in with their own special rhythm. Wheezes, whistles, and the delicate snorting of a toddler with a runny nose. The acoustics of a single-room house turn every sound into surround sound. Just when you think you've adjusted to the bass section of the family, a dog whimpers from the foot of the bed, chasing dreams of that one time they almost caught a chicken. The dog's tail thumps, the mattress shifts, and a cat decides it's time for a moonlight stroll across your midsection. If you're extra blessed, a rooster in the corner starts rehearsing for his morning solo at least 3 hours early, voice cracking in adolescent defiance of the moon. You try to improvise. A pillow over the ears, a shawl wrapped around your head, even gentle humming in hopes of drowning out the chaos. Nothing really works. You contemplate inventing earplugs out of rags and candle wax, but decide it's safer to just accept your fate. Noise, after all, is the lullaby of the masses. The true magic of the snoring symphony is in its unpredictability. Just as you settle into a brief pocket of peace, someone rolls over, kneeing you in the thigh, or a baby whimpers and must be comforted with whispered lullabies. Feet tangle, arms flail, and someone always claims the only soft pillow, leaving the rest of you with the lumpy straw alternative. There's also the conversationalists, the sleep talkers and chronic mumbler complainers. One moment, your aunt is sound asleep. The next, she's scolding imaginary neighbours or demanding someone bring in the cows. It's unsettling, but not as unsettling as your brother, who periodically sits bolt upright, mutters about lost shoes, and collapses back into unconsciousness. In a quieter house, this would be cause for concern. Here, it's just Tuesday. Occasionally there's a lull, and you hear only the creak of the rafters or the soft crackle of the dying fire. You savour these moments, knowing full well they're as temporary as an itch-free scalp after lice patrol. Inevitably, the chorus picks up again, louder than before. It's as if everyone takes turns, determined that nobody gets to sleep too deeply. You realise, with a strange sort of affection, that these are the people you'll spend your whole life with, noisy, loving, ever-present. So you surrender. You nestle in, find the one spot that's both warm and relatively undisturbed, and let yourself be carried away on the sea of night sounds. There's a peculiar comfort in it all, a sense of community that silence could never offer. The snoring, the shuffles, the little animal noises, they're proof that you're not alone. In the 1700s, sleep is not a solo activity. It's a nightly group project, complete with all the mess, noise and camaraderie that comes with family. And somewhere in the midst of this living lullaby, you drift off for real, grateful, exhausted, and only slightly annoyed that the chickens will be starting their next chorus before dawn. Inevitably, a child wakes up terrified of thunder, witches, or just the shadows. You comfort them with a story, a song, or the promise that no, there definitely aren't rats in the walls. Probably. It's the dead of night, and you're just beginning to drift off, nestled in scratchy linen and the communal heat of a dozen family bodies. Then, through the dark comes a whisper, sometimes a whimper, sometimes a full-throated wail. One of the children has been startled awake, eyes wide, heart racing, small hands clutching at blankets and siblings alike. There's no nightlight, no reassuring glow from a hallway lamp. The darkness is total, deep as the bottom of a well and alive with the creaks and sighs of an old timbered house. You shift, groggy but practiced, rolling over to find the source of distress. It's always something. The wind rattling the shutters, an owl's screech, a story told earlier that day about ghosts, goblins, or the neighbour's goose with a suspicious stare. Maybe it's just the silence itself, so unfamiliar after a day filled with noise and bustle, that leaves the mind open to wild inventions. You pull the frightened child close, wrapping them in the circle of your arms, sharing not just your body heat but your presence, your calm, your ability to laugh at fear. The world may be cold and uncertain, but here, together, you're safe. You reach for your arsenal of bedtime comforts, a song passed down from your own mother, half remembered but soothing, a story about clever foxes, brave girls, or the time you scared off a wolf with nothing but a wooden spoon and an attitude, a whispered promise that no, the witches in the woods have much bigger things to worry about than this little house. In these moments, imagination becomes both the culprit and the cure. You invent tales of friendly shadows and guardian mice who keep the monsters away. Maybe you blame the bumps in the night on the family cat, who's both a menace and a hero, depending on the story's needs. When thunder crashes, you assure them it's just the sky moving its furniture, nothing more. You make bargains with the darkness, offering silly bribes. If you stay asleep until morning, I'll let you have the first slice of bread tomorrow. Sometimes it works. Comfort is communal in the 1700s. Siblings wake and offer their own reassurances, an awkward hug, a half-asleep promise to keep watch, a shared blanket thrown over shivering shoulders. Even the dog might creep up to nuzzle against the frightened child, offering a warm, smelly snout as proof that not all surprises in the night are bad. Eventually the tears slow, the shudders subside, and sleep begins to pull the little one back down. You stay awake a while longer, hand resting gently on their head, tracing lazy circles, humming soft nonsense, letting the child feel the weight and reality of love. Your own eyes grow heavy, but you keep the vigil just long enough to be sure the monsters have been banished for another night. Before you finally give in to sleep again, you whisper one last reassurance. You're safe. I'm here. And even if there were rats in the walls, they're much more afraid of you than you are of them. It's not quite true, but it's enough. The house settles, the wind moves on, and you let yourself drift off once more, grateful for the odd tender gift of being someone's shield against the darkness, even if just until dawn. In the 1700s, comfort isn't a plush toy or a glowing screen. It's presence, words, warmth, and the simple, stubborn promise that no nightmare is ever faced alone. Your bed is somehow both sweltering and icy. You alternate between sweating and shivering, repositioning blankets and limbs with the hope of hitting the Goldilocks zone before sunrise. Every night in the 1700s is a thermal adventure. On one side, you're clinging to a thin patch of blanket, sweating as if you've been left too close to the hearth. On the other, your toes have gone numb, pressed up against a patch of hay so cold it might as well be imported from Siberia. The challenge? Achieving that mythical sweet spot. Warm but not roasted, cool but not frostbitten, a balance as elusive as a peaceful moment in a house with 8 people and no insulation. It starts innocently enough. You settle in, blankets arranged just so, a hopeful arm thrown over the least lumpy part of your mattress. Within minutes, a bead of sweat forms on your brow, rolling down to soak your linen shift. You kick off the blanket, only to discover the air outside is cold enough to make your teeth chatter. It's a nightly dance. One leg out, one leg in, covers up, covers down. You shift, sigh, and resign yourself to spending the next hour conducting temperature experiments with your own body. Complicating matters is the household geography. The person closest to the fire may be sweating through their nightgown, while those along the outer edge are busy forming icicles on their eyelashes. You might try to negotiate a trade, swap places with a cousin, edge a bit closer to the centre, or slide a little further from the window that never quite closes. But every move is a gamble. Shift too much and you're liable to end up with someone's feet in your face, or lose your entire share of the communal blanket. Then there are the materials conspiring against you. The hay mattress, which seemed relatively harmless during the day, is now absorbing and radiating every temperature fluctuation with a vengeance. Feathers, if you're lucky enough to have them, trap heat like an oven. But only in certain places. Everywhere else, you're fighting a losing battle against drafts and the cold, damp spots that always seem to find you. Body heat, in theory, should help. In practice, it's a mixed blessing. A pile of siblings or relatives may keep you from freezing, but as soon as anyone shifts or rolls away, the cold rushes in like a ghost with a grudge. Some nights you wake drenched in sweat, heart racing from a nightmare, only to instantly chill as you throw off the covers, shivering anew. Of course, you can try to prepare. Maybe you rub your feet together, searching for friction and warmth. Maybe you wrap an extra shawl around your toes or tuck hot stones, fresh from the hearth, into the bottom of the bed. But stones cool off, and shawls migrate, and the universe seems to have a personal vendetta against your comfort. Eventually, you give up on the fantasy of a perfect temperature. You accept the constant cycle, too hot, too cold, repeat, punctuated by the awkward ballet of adjusting layers in the dark, careful not to disturb anyone else. You tell yourself, at least I'm alive, and try to remember stories of people who survived entire winters in even worse conditions, somehow spinning misery into tales of resilience and grit. By morning, your shift is a testament to the night's struggle, damp with sweat, dusted with straw, and wrapped around feet that are somehow still cold. But you made it. You endured the night's extremes, triumphed over temperature, and learned to find rest somewhere in between. In the 1700s, sleep isn't about comfort, it's about adaptation, persistence, and accepting that some nights you'll sweat, shiver, and dream of a world with central heating. A sudden downpour means a midnight scramble to rearrange pots and buckets. With every drip, you reconsider your life choices and marvel at the miracle of modern roofing. There's nothing quite like the adrenaline rush of waking up to the first tap, tap, tap of rain hitting your forehead at 2 a.m. At first you think it's a dream, maybe a soothing woodland stream, maybe the gentle patter of fairies dancing on the eaves. But reality comes crashing in fast, and it's not fairies, it's rainwater, and it's coming from the precise spot in the ceiling you just patched last week with hope and a handful of straw. Roof leaks in the 1700s are not rare. They're as common as cold porridge and just as welcome. Thatch, after all, is only so waterproof, and every year brings a new collection of cracks, holes, and sagging spots where the roof's enthusiasm for staying above your head is waning. Maintenance is a full-time job for everyone, but especially for those unlucky enough to sleep closest to the outer walls. That's right, you, the lucky one assigned to the family's edge, are also on the front lines of the great indoor water feature. When the heavens open, the whole house jumps into action with a sleepy sort of choreography. Someone fumbles for the candle, someone else grabs the family's prize collection of dented pots and chipped bowls, and together you orchestrate a midnight ballet of bucket placement. Years of practice have given you a sixth sense for predicting where the next drip will appear, but the rain always manages to surprise you, forging entirely new rivers down the plaster and straight into your lap. The soundtrack to this scene is a symphony of drips, steady, plinking rhythms punctuated by the occasional splatter as a bucket overflows or a badly placed rag fails to hold its ground. You lie there listening, counting each drop like sheep, except sheep don't make your mattress wet or threaten to turn your bedroom into a bog. With every drip, you reevaluate everything. Why did you ever wish for rain in last month's prayers? Who decided this was the best place for the bed? Is it too late to swap sleeping spots with a sibling who still believes the house is charming? Sleep is now a game of dodging leaks. You curl tighter into the dry spots, balancing on the edge of the mattress, adjusting your nightcap to deflect errant drips like some medieval water defense system. Blankets are hastily rearranged, and extra shifts or shawls are pressed into service as makeshift tarps. Occasionally, a rogue drop lands on your nose, and for a moment you're awake and aware of every flaw in the ceiling above. Of course, the roof doesn't leak quietly. A gust of wind can blow the rain sideways, sending a fresh wave through previously secure thatch. Every new puddle is a crisis, and the family's inventory of waterproof goods, never impressive to begin with, dwindles quickly. In the morning, there will be more work, moving beds to drier ground, mopping up puddles with whatever is least precious, and another round of patching using mud, sticks, and a healthy dose of denial. Despite all the chaos, there's a strange camaraderie in the shared midnight struggle. The family grumbles and laughs in equal measure, telling stories of even worse storms and heroic feats of bucket balancing past. When the rain finally stops, everyone collapses in soggy heaps, grateful for a break, however brief, and vowing again to fix the roof properly as soon as the sun rises. And as you drift back towards sleep, surrounded by buckets, puddles, and the faint hope that tonight's leak was the last, you marvel at the resilience required for nightly life in the 1700s. Modern roofing may be boring, but it rarely keeps you up at night inventing new ways to stay dry. In this old house, every rainy night is a lesson in improvisation, humility, and the true meaning of home improvements. You sneak a bite of hard cheese or leftover bread, praying no one hears you. Food in bed is frowned upon, but hunger is relentless, and besides, the rats are already helping themselves. Midnight cravings aren't a modern invention. In the 1700s, when supper is long past and the warmth of the fire has faded, hunger creeps in just as persistently as the cold. You try to ignore it, tell yourself that the growl in your stomach is just a sign of virtue, a badge of thrift and discipline. But sometimes, the only thing standing between you and absolute misery is a crumb of bread saved from the evening meal or a sliver of hard, suspiciously waxy cheese. Of course, the act of midnight snacking is a covert operation. Food in bed is generally forbidden, not because anyone is worried about crumbs in the sheets. The sheets, let's face it, have seen far worse. But because every morsel is precious. Bread doesn't come easy, and cheese is the product of weeks of waiting, watching, and occasionally fending off a very motivated goat. So when you decide to indulge, it's with the guilty thrill of a seasoned criminal. You wait until the room is quiet, until the chorus of snoring relatives has reached its second act, and even the dog is chasing rabbits in its sleep. Then you slip your hand under the mattress or into a secret pocket of your nightclothes, retrieving your hidden treasure. The bread is hard enough to double as a weapon, but you gnaw at it with a satisfaction that has nothing to do with texture and everything to do with rebellion. Cheese is even riskier. Its pungent scent can betray you in seconds, alerting every half-asleep sibling within range that there are snacks afoot. You break off the smallest possible bite, savouring the sharp tang on your tongue. There's always the fear that someone will roll over, eyes half open, and demand a share. Sharing is noble, but so is self-preservation. Tonight the only one you're competing with is the family of rats who have made the walls their own. If you're especially unlucky, you'll hear the soft skitter of tiny paws, a reminder that you're never truly alone with your treats. For the truly brave, midnight snacks are a chance to try out culinary innovations. Maybe you sneak a cold turnip, or risk it all for a bite of dried apple pilfered from the winter stores. Sweetness is a rare luxury. Dried fruit is closely guarded, and sugar, if you ever see it, is measured out with the precision of a royal jeweller. You imagine a world where honey is plentiful and cakes appear at the wave of a hand. But for now, a nibble of crust will have to do. There are consequences to this forbidden feast. The next morning, crumbs may give you away, or a sibling might discover the rind of cheese you hid too carelessly. Accusations fly, alliances are forged and broken, and somehow the missing food is always blamed on the dog, the rats, or the one cousin with the shiftiest eyes. You maintain your innocence with the straight face of a seasoned professional. After all, midnight hunger is a force of nature, and what the rats don't eat, you reason, ought to go to someone who appreciates it. Despite the secrecy and the risks, the midnight snack is a comfort, a small act of rebellion against the hardships of daily life. You savour each bite not just for the flavour, but for the reminder that even in the leanest times, you can carve out a little pleasure for yourself. When at last you set aside the last crumb, lick your fingers and curl back into bed, your belly is no fuller than before, but your spirit is just a little lighter. And as you drift off to sleep, you do so with the quiet pride of a master thief, and the contentment of someone who knows that in a world of endless chores and endless noise, sometimes the sweetest comfort is found in the smallest, secret bite. Sharing a bed means sharing secrets. Whispers fill the dark as sisters, mothers and aunts swap stories, vent frustrations and plot the next day's survival. The gossip is hot, the room is not. The world of the 1700s isn't exactly built for privacy, but it is built for conversation. By day, life is a flurry of chores and shouted instructions, but by night, as the wind rattles the shutters and the embers die down, things get quieter and the gossip gets louder. The bed, crowded though it may be, becomes the safest place to let secrets spill and grievances bubble up. There, beneath a heap of scratchy blankets and sighing relatives, the true business of the household begins. It starts innocently enough. Someone rolls over, sighs dramatically, and mutters about the state of the bread, or the neighbour's suspiciously fat chickens. One thing leads to another, and suddenly every minor disaster and a major annoyance of the day is up for review. Someone confesses to sneaking an extra apple from the pantry. Someone else admits that the missing sock is really a casualty of a failed attempt at improvised doll-making. Accusations are whispered, rebuttals murmured, and for a few precious minutes the weight of daily hardship feels a little lighter. The women take the lead, as they always do, sisters whispering plans for tomorrow's laundry, mothers sighing about stubborn children, and aunts spinning tales of their own wild youth, half true and half for dramatic effect. The youngest listen with wide eyes, taking mental notes for the day when they'll have stories of their own to embellish. The topics are as varied as the household: recipes, rumours, marriage prospects, the peculiar habits of local menfolk, the latest market scuffles, and of course the fate of Mrs. Alder's scandalous new dress. The best gossip is always saved for night time. The darkness feels protective, a velvet curtain that turns ordinary muttering into grand confessions. Voices drop to a conspiratorial hush, just in case anyone outside the bed is eavesdropping. Though, truthfully, if you're not in the bed, you're probably asleep, or wishing you were. Laughter is stifled in the blankets, and every now and then, someone has to shush the group before giggles wake the baby, or, worse, draw the attention of a scolding elder who insists that sleep is more important than storytelling. Of course, pillow talk isn't always kind. Old feuds resurface. Who borrowed whose scarf? Who ruined the stew? Who keeps forgetting to sweep under the hearth? Apologies may be muttered, or new alliances quietly formed for the next day's chores. And there's always a little good-natured mockery, a sibling's embarrassing tumble, a neighbour's botched attempt at courting, or the tragic fate of last week's bread pudding. The humour is sharp but loving. Everyone takes their turn as the evening's entertainment. Sometimes the conversation turns to dreams, what life might be like somewhere else, or what the future could hold if fortunes changed. The older women caution against wild imaginings, but can't resist chiming in with their own what-ifs and might-have-beens. For a few moments, everyone is somewhere else, far from the crowded bed and the endless responsibilities. Eventually voices grow softer, sentences trail off, and the exhaustion of the day finally outweighs the lure of gossip. Someone yawns, someone else snores. But the bond of secrets shared and worries voiced lingers in the darkness. There's comfort in knowing that, whatever else happens, you're not alone with your troubles or your schemes. And so, in the cool, cramped darkness, you drift off to sleep, warmed by the laughter and confidences of those beside you. Tomorrow will bring new stories, fresh annoyances, and, if you're lucky, a brand new rumour or two. In the 1700s, the bed is never just a place for rest. It's the stage for the nightly performance of survival, support, and a little scandal to keep things interesting. Feeling unwell? Time for a dose of syrup of poppies, a spoonful of honey, or some mystery tincture that may or may not contain actual snake oil. Side effects include sleep, hallucinations, or waking up still tired. Illness and discomfort are frequent companions in a 1700s household, especially as night falls and the distractions of the day fade away. As you shuffle into bed, your body suddenly remembers every ache, twinge, and sniffle it's been ignoring since dawn. Fortunately, or unfortunately, there's no shortage of home remedies waiting for you, prepared by the seasoned hands of mothers, aunts, and grandmothers who've weathered many a cold night. The nightstand, if you have one, becomes a pharmacy of last resort. Jars, bottles, and pouches line its surface, each containing a cure more mysterious than the last. There's the old standby, syrup of poppies, a thick, bittersweet concoction guaranteed to make you drowsy, sometimes a little too drowsy. You're warned to take just a drop, lest you spend the next morning wandering in a fog, unsure whether you're still dreaming. Even so, the promise of a night's rest free from coughing is usually too tempting to resist. If poppy syrup isn't your style, there's always honey. A spoonful before bed is the catch-all solution for sore throats, upset stomachs, and general malaise. If nothing else, it's sweet and comforting, a rare treat in a world where sugar is precious and most desserts are more carrot than cake. Grandmother claims a little honey and hot water can cure anything short of heartbreak. You're skeptical, but your options are limited. Then there are the potions of dubious origin. Herbal teas brewed with whatever is growing out back, a thimbleful of gin for the nerves, or that infamous tincture that smells vaguely medicinal and definitely questionable. No one knows exactly what's in it. Possibly sage, possibly something gathered under a full moon, possibly a dash of whatever was left in the bottom of the bottle. Some claim it chases away fever. Others whisper about wild dreams and shadowy visions that linger until sunrise. The brave, the desperate, and the truly congested will try anything once. For more persistent ailments, the remedies get stranger. Onions sliced and placed on the soles of your feet. A poultice of mashed garlic and lard, wrapped in linen and strapped to your chest. Vinegar-soaked rags draped across your forehead for headaches, and a strong-smelling broth made with roots and bones for chills. The logic behind these cures is murky at best, but what matters is that they're given with love, determination, and the absolute certainty that at the very least you'll be distracted from whatever's actually wrong. No remedy is complete without a ritual, prayers muttered, blessings bestowed, and superstitions observed. Drink this on the left side, your aunt insists, or don't cross your feet until morning, or the medicine won't work. You follow the rules, partly out of hope, partly because arguing is more exhausting than the illness itself. Sometimes the cure works. Sometimes you fall asleep more quickly, soothed by honey or gently knocked out by poppy syrup. Other times you toss and turn anyway, uncertain whether the remedy helped or just gave you a new flavour to regret. The family debates the efficacy of every treatment, each swearing by their own favourite recipe, trading stories of miraculous recoveries and legendary failures. As dawn approaches, you may wake up groggy, still tired, or on rare miraculous occasions, actually feeling better. Either way, you survived another night, wrapped in linen, hope, and a dose of whatever magic lives at the bottom of the family medicine chest. In the 1700s, medicine is part science, part tradition, and part let's see what happens. You swallow, pray, and sleep, trusting that, if nothing else, morning will bring a fresh start, and, if necessary, a brand new potion to try. Every home has its hauntings. Tales of ghosts, banshees, or vengeful spirits are shared just before bed because nothing encourages restful sleep like abject terror. Night falls quickly in the 1700s. The fire dwindles, the shadows stretch, and suddenly your world is limited to what you can see by candlelight. And as everyone settles into their straw-stuffed beds, a hush falls that can only mean one thing: it's story time. But these aren't tales of heroism or romance. No, these are the stories best told in whispers: ghosts in the orchard, banshees in the lane, the vengeful spirit of the baker's wife who still haunts the pantry looking for her last loaf. It always starts the same way. Someone, usually the eldest, leans in and says, "Did you hear what happened to old Mr. Granger?" Instantly everyone is listening except for that one sibling who pretends not to care, but is clutching their blanket a little tighter. The tale is spun slowly, with details carefully added for maximum chill. The footsteps in the loft, the flickering candle that went out on its own, the chilling wail that echoed through the village just as the clock struck midnight. Superstition isn't a hobby here, it's a survival skill. You know to hang a sprig of rosemary over the door for protection, never sweep dust out after dark, it invites trouble in, and keep a bit of iron under your pillow to ward off witches. Banshees are said to appear before a great sorrow, so naturally every odd shadow at the window is cause for concern, and everyone swears that the old well in the next field is bottomless, a gateway to somewhere best not mentioned after sunset. Parents play along, equal parts warning and entertainment. If you don't behave, the bogeyman will come, they say, eyes wide and serious. Even the bravest adults admit to certain rituals, knocking 3 times on the headboard, muttering a prayer before crossing the threshold, leaving a bowl of milk out for the fae. After all, why tempt fate? Of course, these stories have a purpose. They explain the creaks and groans of an old house, the mysterious cold spots, the flickers in the corner of your eye. They keep children from wandering off after dark and maybe, just maybe, remind everyone to cherish the living while the dead are still out of sight. Sometimes, a neighbour adds fresh material to the local canon. "My cousin's friend's aunt saw a lady in white near the riverbank," they whisper, "and no one's gone fishing there since." The next morning someone finds odd footprints by the water, and for weeks no one ventures out alone after dusk. The younger children, wide-eyed and shivering, beg for reassurance. There's nothing out there, right, you say, but you close the window just a bit tighter. Maybe you tell a funny story to break the tension, or challenge the bravest to sleep with their toes uncovered. A dare only the reckless accept. By the end of story hour, everyone is jumpy, every shadow suspect, every sound amplified. But there's comfort too, a closeness in huddling together against the unknown. The ghosts you face as a family are somehow less frightening, even as you listen for footsteps in the hall, And as you drift off, heart pounding, you remind yourself that every home is haunted in its own way, by stories, by memories, by the shared thrill of being just a little bit scared together. In the 1700s, it turns out, the most powerful magic is the ability to face the darkness and laugh, even while you keep one eye on the window just in case. If your husband's been out late at the tavern, brace yourself. The marital bed is now a wrestling match between snoring, tossing, and a strong smell of ale. Romantic. You hear him long before you see him, the front door creaking, heavy boots shuffling, and that familiar off-key humming that means he's either in good spirits or desperately trying to sound like he is. The family dog lifts its head, sighs, and decides against getting involved. You, on the other hand, don't have a choice. The room is pitch dark, the air cold, and there's nothing quite like the anticipation of sharing your bed with someone who spent the last few hours in the company of beer, dice, and men who can't keep secrets. He fumbles his way to the bed, attempting stealth, and failing completely. In the 1700s, silence is a rare commodity, but tonight it's banished entirely by the sound of him tripping over the firewood, muttering an apology to the table, and finally landing on the mattress with a groan. He smells of roasted meat, wood smoke, and a brewery's worth of ale. His hair is mussed, his coat half on, and he brings with him the cold air of the outdoors and the boisterous warmth of the tavern. There's no such thing as a his side or her side of the bed. There's just the space that's left after everyone else squeezes in. You brace for the inevitable. The first clumsy hug that's really just a grab for warmth, the second hug that's him attempting to find his pillow, and the third where he finally gives up and just collapses into a heap. If you were lucky enough to claim the inside spot earlier, you're safe for now. But if you're on the edge, prepare for a night spent teetering dangerously close to the floor, one powerful snore away from disaster. The bed itself is already overcrowded, of course. Children at your feet, a sibling somewhere in the mix, and at least one cat who has zero intention of moving for anybody, no matter how many drinks they've had. The added chaos of a returning husband means a flurry of shifting limbs, tangled blankets, and whispered negotiations about who gets the pillow and who gets the flat, lumpy spot. As soon as he settles, the snoring begins, loud, unpredictable, and impossible to ignore. You try to nudge him onto his side, the ancient remedy for all manner of nocturnal disturbances, but he's as limp as a sack of flour and twice as stubborn. The scent of ale fills the room, mingling with straw, candle wax, and the faint but ever-present aroma of tomorrow's laundry. Every so often he mutters in his sleep, half-formed confessions about tavern gossip, or possibly just arguments with the neighbour's cow. Occasionally he rolls over and flings an arm or a leg across you, a gesture that is either affectionate or an unintentional pin, depending on his accuracy and your mood. The cat, insulted by this lack of boundaries, retaliates by kneading your husband's back with a vengeance. You could be annoyed. Sometimes you are. But other nights, it's simply part of the rhythm of 18th century marriage, equal parts snuggle and struggle. You remember that warmth is precious, that laughter can deflate the sharpest elbow, and that, with enough time, even the worst snoring becomes just another sound in the night's orchestra. Eventually the chaos subsides. He quiets, the household settles, and you pull the blankets up around your shoulders, grateful for the crowd, the commotion, and the peculiar comfort of knowing you're never alone. In the 1700s, romance isn't a candlelit serenade. It's learning to sleep through a tavern brawl reenacted in your own bed and waking up the next morning, still a team, still tangled, still together. Before the sun, before the rooster, there's always one person who wakes up first to stoke the fire and start the water boiling. Their reward? 5 minutes of silence and a head start on exhaustion. Long before anyone else is even dreaming of getting out of bed, you're already awake, Sometimes because you want to be, but mostly because someone has to be. The fire doesn't tend itself, the water doesn't heat on its own, and breakfast doesn't magically appear, unless you count dreams of a future with kitchen fairies. So you ease out of bed as quietly as possible, though the mattress creaks and someone always groans. The icy floor bites your feet and the chill makes you regret every decision, but you move quietly and quickly, savouring the brief solitude. The first step is the fire, because if the hearth went out during the night, the morning is going to be rough for everyone. You kneel down, peering into the ashes, hoping for a glimmer of red. If you're lucky, there's a single stubborn ember clinging to life, and with careful coaxing and a gentle breath, you can bring it roaring back to existence. If not, it's time to beg a neighbour for a coal, and try not to look too desperate when you knock on their door in your nightcap. With the fire going, the kitchen comes alive in its own way. You fill the kettle slowly so as not to wake everyone, and set it over the flames, listening to the familiar hiss and pop. Water boils slowly, and it gives you the rarest luxury in a crowded home. A few moments entirely to yourself. The silence is profound. No bickering siblings, no clattering pots, no barking dogs or demanding babies. It's you, the crackle of firewood, and a quiet that feels almost sacred. These are the minutes when you can think about the day ahead, about yesterday's gossip, about whether it's worth trying to mend that torn shift before breakfast, or just patching it with hope and a prayer. Maybe you stare out the frosted window, watching the sky shift from black to purple, knowing that the moment the sun shows itself, the household will erupt into motion. Your reward, such as it is this, the feeling of control, however fleeting, over the chaos to come. Maybe you sneak a nibble of last night's bread or a taste of honey, or just stand over the fire soaking in the warmth before anyone else can steal it. If you're feeling ambitious, you might even lay out a few things for breakfast, oats, a bit of salt, whatever the pantry hasn't already given up to the mice. Then, inevitably, the spell is broken. The rooster, never one to miss his cue, announces the day, and the house stirs. Doors creak, beds groan. The first complaints rise from sleepy mouths. Children tumble out of bed, half-dressed and half awake, looking for warmth and comfort. The dog barks at nothing in particular, and suddenly you're not alone anymore. But for those 5 minutes, you owned the morning. You braved the cold, stoked the fire, and started the day on your terms, even if your terms really means first to feel exhausted. In a world where personal space is scarce and quiet is a memory, that small pocket of time is as precious as gold. So here's to the early riser, the unsung hero, the fire stoker, the kettle boiler, the one who keeps the household running before the world even notices the night is over. The next time you hear a rooster crow, spare a thought for the one who's already halfway through their first cup of water, planning a day nobody will thank them for, but everyone depends on all the same. As you finally drift towards sleep, your last thought is of escaping to a warm bath, a private room, or a future where bedtime is actually restful. Spoiler: you wake up in the 1700s again. It's a universal tradition, no matter the century. When the day is finally done and the chaos of the household has settled into a symphony of snores, you let your mind wander somewhere else. Here, crammed into a lumpy mattress, sharing blankets with an entire extended family, plus a dog and at least one ambitious mouse, escape is more than a fantasy. It's an act of nightly survival. Maybe you picture yourself in a grand estate tucked beneath soft perfumed sheets, tended by silent maids and with no sibling elbows poking into your back. The room is silent, the air warm, and not a single chamber pot in sight. Or maybe your dream is humbler, just a clean, quiet space with walls thick enough to muffle snoring and a window that actually keeps out the rain. You imagine yourself slipping into a hot bath just for you, No one banging on the door or dumping laundry in behind you. You could soak until your skin wrinkles and no one would care. You know these fantasies are as fragile as a spun sugar cake, but you savour them anyway. The more absurd, the better. What would it feel like to lie on a feather mattress with no lumps? To pull a thick, soft blanket over yourself and know it hasn't just been aired out in the yard that morning? What if bedtime meant peace, privacy, and the chance to fall asleep without first negotiating a truce over pillow territory? In your imagined future, you have your own room, maybe even your own house. You control the bedtime stories, the candlelight, the pace of winding down. There's no midnight lice patrol, no whispered gossip to keep you up, no foot race to be the first to reach the chamber pot before disaster strikes. In this world you can stretch out, sigh contentedly, and most luxurious of all, fall asleep and wake up without interruption. But then, reality pulls you back. The dog shifts and lets out a snort. The baby whimpers, a draught sneaks through the thatch, and you're reminded that for all your dreaming, you're still firmly rooted in the 1700s. There's comfort here too, a familiar tangle of warmth, the steady breathing of loved ones all around, the ritual rhythms that bind the family together. Still, you hold on to your dream. It doesn't have to be a palace. Sometimes escape is as simple as 5 extra minutes beneath the covers in the morning, or the quiet miracle of a few moments alone while the rest of the house still sleeps. Maybe one day the world will change. Maybe the next generation will know what it's like to close a door and enjoy true unbroken silence. For now, the fantasy is enough to soften the sharp edges of nightly routine. It's hope, tucked in between the layers of linen and hay, sweetening the reality of shared spaces and relentless togetherness. Your last waking thought is a silent promise. If you ever do find your own space, your own peace, you'll never take it for granted. But as dawn creeps through the shutters, you open your eyes and find the world unchanged, a little colder, a little noisier, but still yours. Until then, you keep dreaming. And that, in the 1700s, might just be the most restful part of the night. Somewhere between undressing and crawling into bed, at least one of your stockings has vanished into the abyss. Was it eaten by the laundry pile? Did the family dog make off with it again? You'll never know. Searching under the bed yields only more straw, 2 buttons, and the vague suspicion that household objects are running away for a better life. In the grand hierarchy of nightly frustrations, few are as persistent or as mysterious as the case of the missing stocking. You could swear you started the evening with 2, the same slightly mismatched pair you've been patching and repatching for months. Yet somehow, as you peel off layers of linen, wool, and whatever dignity you had left after a day in the fields, one stocking simply disappears. It's the sort of household riddle that would stump the world's greatest minds, if only anyone cared enough to solve it. The investigation begins the way all good nighttime quests do, with hope and a candle stub. You crouch on cold floorboards, lifting corners of the bedding and poking into suspicious piles of clothing. Is it hiding in the tangled mass of petticoats and shifts? Did it get caught in the folds of your nightdress, or is it wedged behind the chamber pot, plotting its next move? All you find is dust, an impressive collection of straw, and a couple of buttons that must have escaped during last week's mending session. Then comes the time-honoured tradition of blaming the usual suspects. The family dog, curled innocently by the hearth, is eyed with suspicion. He's been known to run off with a stocking or 2, and the evidence is usually discovered weeks later, chewed beyond recognition and smelling faintly of whatever the dog considers a delicacy. The cat, for its part, is no help, sprawled luxuriously across your pillow and pointedly ignoring the drama. Younger siblings are prime suspects as well, especially those with a fondness for playing dress-up or building forts out of anything remotely soft and stretchy. You think back to the laundry routine such as it is. Stockings are washed, but rarely at the same time and seldom with much enthusiasm. They're stretched over chairs, hung from rafters, and sometimes left to dry on the hedge outside, where a strong breeze or a determined magpie might spirit them away. Even when both stockings survive the wash, they're unlikely to emerge as an actual pair. Colour fades, holes appear, and what started as two nearly identical socks gradually become siblings in name only. Resigned, you search the last refuge of lost laundry, under the bed. This too is an exercise in futility. You push aside old shoes, a wooden spoon, and the remnants of last autumn's dried leaves, but the only thing you retrieve is a deeper respect for the persistence of household chaos. Every woman in the house has her own story of the stocking that vanished, never to be seen again, only for it to turn up months later in a basket, or as part of a rag rug, or, more alarmingly, already being worn by someone else. If you're clever, you keep a secret stash of emergency stockings, those with the fewest holes patched beyond recognition, but still passable for nights like this. Tonight, though, even those have gone missing, so you resign yourself to sleeping with one bare foot, shivering under a blanket that suddenly feels half its usual size. You sigh, blow out your candle, and let the darkness claim your missing stocking for the night. In the morning, you'll find it, or you won't. Maybe it will turn up in the wash, or maybe the household will absorb its absence, as it does so many small daily losses. For now, you marvel at the mystery, add fine stocking to tomorrow's endless to-do list, and close your eyes, 1 foot cold and exposed, certain only of this. In the 1700s, even the laundry has a sense of humour. Just as you're about to doze off, a familiar itch returns, the delicate waltz of bedbugs making their nightly rounds. You scratch, swat, and resign yourself to being the main course for an entire ecosystem. Pest control is a pipe dream. Mutual annoyance is the only peace treaty on offer. Bedtime in the 1700s isn't just about finding the least lumpy spot in your straw mattress or negotiating blanket rights with a room full of snoring relatives. It's also about preparing for the nightly invasion of the bedbugs, a tiny, relentless army that knows no social class and takes no prisoners. The unwelcome truth is, no matter how clean you are, how many times you boil your sheets, or how ferociously you air out your mattress, bedbugs find you. They always do. It starts with a tickle, a pinprick, just as your body begins to relax. The candle is out, the fire is banked, and you're finally horizontal. Then, scratch. You pause, hoping it was just a stray thread. But no, the itching grows. You swat at your leg, rub at your arm, and try to find a cool spot untouched by tiny feet and tinier mouths. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the faint, triumphant tap dance of bedbugs shuffling through your sheets. Of course, everyone in the household has their own methods of coping. Some swear by tucking a sprig of wormwood or lavender in their pillowcase, a fragrant gesture that might confuse a particularly polite bedbug, but never deters the seasoned veterans. Others douse their sheets with vinegar or dust the mattress with fine ashes, but these remedies only serve to add a hint of salad dressing or a powdery film to the nightly ordeal. The truly desperate will occasionally sleep sitting up, swaddled in as many layers as possible, in the vain hope that a moving target is harder to bite. Every family has its own stories, legends really, about the year the bugs were especially bad. "Remember that summer we camped in the barn," someone whispers, and shudders ripple down the row of sleepers. The only thing worse than bedbugs in your bed is bedbugs in your nightcap, and everyone swears it happened to a cousin once. Nightly bug checks are now part of the routine. If you catch one, you show it off with the weary pride of someone who's just found a rare coin, then squash it with a grim satisfaction and hope you've sent a message to the others. Occasionally you'll wake to a constellation of red bites on your arms, ankles, or, if the bugs are feeling ambitious, your face. You compare notes at breakfast, scratching in unison, swapping tips and curses, and marvelling at the persistence of your tiny tormentors. But after a while, the bugs become just another part of the nightly soundtrack. You develop an itchy acceptance, a sort of grudging respect for their determination. They too are just trying to survive in a world that doesn't care about comfort. There's a perverse camaraderie in knowing you're not suffering alone. Even the wealthiest household in town is secretly scratching under the covers. You try to distract yourself with thoughts of something pleasant, a cool stream, a breeze through the orchard, a dream of linen sheets that are actually clean and pest-free. Eventually exhaustion wins out. You stop scratching, stop fighting, and drift off, hoping the bugs will show a little mercy tonight. In the end, the bedbug ballet is just another nightly trial. One more lesson in resilience, patience, and the strange ability to sleep in spite of everything. If you wake with a new collection of bites, you simply add them to your tally, shake out your nightdress, and get ready to do it all again the next evening. Because in the 1700s, if you can't beat the bedbugs, you might as well learn to dance. Even the lightest midnight wanderer turns into a one-person percussion section, thanks to ancient wooden floorboards that creak, groan, and announce your every move. Need a drink? Want to check on a child? Congratulations, you've just woken the entire household and 3 chickens. Stealth is for another century. The house, quiet and dark, is an acoustical marvel. Floorboards that held their peace all day now find their voice the moment your bare foot touches them. No matter how gingerly you try to tiptoe, the boards respond with a drama worthy of an opera house. Shrill creaks, mournful groans, and the occasional ominous thunk that makes you pause and wonder if you've stepped on something important. You probably have. It's a performance, and you're the unwitting star. Nighttime is when the house itself seems to settle scores. Maybe you forgot to sweep under the table, maybe you let the fire go out a little early, or maybe it's just your turn. Every step is a negotiation with fate. Do you try the path near the hearth, risking the warped plank, or the route by the window, where that loose board is just waiting to betray you? There are no silent choices, only options for new noises. The rest of the family knows the routine. Someone rises, and instantly every sleeper's ear perks up. Is it the dog, the cat, or a particularly ambitious mouse? No, it's you, instantly recognizable by your unique pattern of creaks and sighs. If you're on your way to the chamber pot, it's a public affair. Even the neighbour's rooster, inexplicably alert at all hours, may let out a questioning squawk. You do your best to move quickly, hoping to finish your business before a chorus of grumbling erupts from every bed. The real magic is how the sound travels. Thin walls do nothing to muffle your midnight percussion, and the floor is a communal drum. Babies stir, children mumble complaints, and an older relative, who claims never to sleep anyway, offers helpful advice from the darkness about which boards are quietest. Spoiler, none of them are. Occasionally there's a genuine emergency, a sick child, a forgotten window letting in a draught, or the fire sputtering low. You leap into action, your heroic dash across the room punctuated by a cacophony that would terrify even the boldest burglar. You're torn between urgency and the futile hope that, by some miracle, your feet will glide silently this time. They never do. Some nights, the sound is a source of family lore. Tales are swapped over breakfast about who woke whom, who startled the dog, and who knocked over the bucket in the great midnight expedition. The youngest children practice their best silent walk, usually ending in disaster and a fit of giggles. The house has a long memory for these nocturnal journeys, and every floorboard tells your story, sometimes literally, in the form of a loose nail or a well-worn groove. There's a strange comfort in the nightly noise. You're never really alone in your wanderings. Your family, your animals, even your house itself are all in it together. Every squeak is a reminder of a living home, patched and mended and full of life. You dream of rugs thick enough to muffle sound, or a day when you might have a floor that doesn't comment on your every move. But for now you adapt, adjusting your step, holding your breath and praying the next board will have mercy. As you finally slip back into bed, heart still racing from the stress of your midnight performance, you know you've left your mark. One more verse in the household's nightly symphony. In the 1700s, even silence is noisy, and stealth is just a hopeful fantasy best left to the next century. A sudden, mysterious aroma wafts through the bedroom. Part mould, part mystery, maybe a hint of cheese. Is it coming from the bed, the dog, or Uncle Edmund's boots lurking in the corner? You contemplate lighting another lavender sachet, but you know deep down there isn't enough potpourri in the world. Scent is one of the defining features of 18th century domestic life. Each night, just as you're sinking into what you hope is a cleanish patch of hay, your nose is ambushed by a cocktail of odours that defy identification. Some are faint, background notes of old wood and wool, while others are sharp, attention-grabbing and just a little bit menacing. The bedroom, overcrowded and underventilated, becomes a living museum of all the day's activities, triumphs and questionable decisions. You begin the detective work. Is the whiff earthy, like a distant cellar? Mould has a way of creeping in, clinging to anything that's been damp too long. A straw mattress, a forgotten shawl, or that stack of firewood in the corner. Maybe it's something a little sour. The culprit could easily be leftover cheese from a midnight snack, stashed by a sibling who didn't have the heart or the stomach to finish it. If the scent is oddly sharp, with undertones of something vaguely herbal, you can blame the last round of laundry, which never quite dried on the line and brought the smell of the river home with it. Of course, human factors can't be overlooked. There's the dog, who always seems to roll in whatever the world has to offer, then curls up right at your feet, radiating a special brand of eau de barnyard. Or perhaps it's Uncle Edmund's boots, well-aged leather steeped in memories of mud, sweat, and adventures best left unspoken. He claims airing them out by the hearth is good for the soul, but you suspect the boots are staging a quiet revolt. Then there's the more existential fear. What if the smell is coming from you? You do a quick, surreptitious sniff of your own sleeve, your hair, even your socks. Cleanliness is a relative concept after all, and in a world where hot water is precious and soap is only slightly less so, you've learned to accept a certain natural musk as part of the nightly routine. But still, you hope you're not the primary offender tonight. Children add their own layer to the aromatic tapestry, trailing scents of grass, flower, and the lingering tang of whatever they used to help clean earlier. Add in the faint, acrid edge of candle smoke and the sweet, cloying perfume of old lavender sachets, valiantly fighting a losing battle, and you have a recipe for a sensory experience that's equal parts nostalgic and alarming. Some nights, you try to mask the smell, wave around a bundle of dried herbs, sprinkle a bit of vinegar, or leave the window cracked to invite in the fresh air, and inevitably more bugs. Most nights, you simply accept it. These scents are part of the family, just as much as the snores, the whispers, and the steady tick of the kitchen clock. You make a joke, who left the cheese under the bed, and everyone laughs, pretending not to care, because what else can you do? Eventually the whiff fades into the background, replaced by dreams of fresh meadows, hot bread, or a life where the most mysterious thing about bedtime is how you manage to fall asleep so quickly. In the 1700s, you learn to embrace the peculiar and the pungent. Every unexplained aroma is a story, a mystery, and a reminder that you're living history, one sniff at a time. And so you drift off, serenaded by the soft symphony of smells, grateful for the distractions of family and fatigue, knowing tomorrow will bring a new bouquet of surprises, just another chapter in the never-ending saga of the mysterious whiff. Your one nice petticoat has torn again, which means it's time for some frantic nighttime needlework by flickering candlelight. You jab your thumb, squint, and hope your stitches hold up through tomorrow's chores. By the end, your mending looks more like interpretive embroidery than fashion, but at least it's done before sunrise. There's a special kind of exhaustion that settles in after a long day of work, but nothing chases sleep away faster than the sudden, sinking realization that you can't possibly face tomorrow with a torn hem or a hole the size of a guinea pig in your best skirt. There's no such thing as a backup wardrobe in the 1700s, and each garment is both investment and lifeline. So, as the rest of the house drifts towards sleep, you gather your fraying petticoat, your jar of precious needles, and a ragged spool of thread, and settle down for yet another evening of makeshift tailoring. The setting is hardly ideal. Your only light is a stuttering candle, more shadow than flame, wobbling in the draught. Your workstation is a splintery chair, or more often the edge of the bed, knees tucked up to keep fabric off the dirt floor. Family members snore softly around you, occasionally muttering in their sleep, while you try to thread a needle with hands that are tired and eyes that can barely focus after squinting all day. The fabric is stubborn, just like everything else in your life. Linen frays, wool stretches, and you spend half your time unpicking knots made by candlelit clumsiness. Sometimes, in your haste, you jab yourself, once, twice, 3 times, and each prick feels like a personal affront. You suck your thumb, bite your lip, and soldier on, because the thought of facing the village in ripped clothing is worse than a dozen pricked fingers. There's a rhythm to nighttime mending. Stitch, squint, sigh. Every pass of the needle is a small prayer, that the thread holds, that the patch blends in, that no one will notice the newest addition to your garment's mosaic of repairs. Over time, your petticoat tells your life story, each patch a memory, each odd, uneven stitch a testament to a day survived. The patterns are accidental, the colours rarely matching, but there's a certain pride in knowing that every repair is proof you keep going. If you're lucky, you have a mother or sister nearby, also patching, and together you share quiet, whispered conversation. Maybe you trade stories, advice, or even bits of spare thread. You laugh at the absurdity of your fashion and grumble about the latest disaster, mud splashes, runaway geese, the inevitable wear of too much work and too little rest. Sometimes, mending is the only time you get to yourself. The world quiets down, your thoughts wander, and for a little while, you can focus on something as small and simple as a row of stitches. Maybe you daydream about a world with sturdy fabric, endless needles, and light bright enough to see every detail. Or maybe you just focus on getting the job done before your eyelids finally droop shut. By the end, your hands are sore, your eyes ache, and your petticoat is slightly more patchwork than before. You snuff the candle, shake out your cramped fingers and slide under the covers, your repaired clothing folded neatly for tomorrow. You know the mend might only last a day, 2 if you're lucky, but you rest easier knowing you faced down one more of life's little emergencies, needle in hand, and won. Because in the 1700s, survival isn't just about grand heroics. Sometimes it's about a crooked seam, a mismatched patch, and the quiet satisfaction of making do. As the last candle guttered out and you finally drifted to sleep, hair in disarray, nightcap askew, 1 foot poking out from beneath a mound of scratchy linen, you managed what every 1700s woman did. You survived the night. You dodged chamber pots, braved haunted floorboards, negotiated peace with the bedbugs, and performed a bedtime routine so complicated it deserves its own Olympic event. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't restful, but it was real, and every small act, every midnight laugh, every whispered story beneath moth-eaten covers built a thread in the tapestry of history. Night after night, women endured the cold, the noise, the never-ending parade of small disasters, and still manage to rise before the rooster, ready for another day that started far too early and ended far too late. So tonight, as you tuck yourself into a bed that doesn't poke, scratch, or try to escape out the window, maybe take a quiet moment to be grateful. Grateful for pillows that don't collapse, sheets that don't bite, and a world where you can turn off the light with a switch, not with a prayer that your sleeve doesn't catch fire. Maybe whisper a little thank you to all the women who endured, who adapted, and who found ways to laugh through the chaos, turning survival into an art form. Because history, in all its itchy, exhausting, hilarious glory, reminds us that people have always been stubborn, hopeful, and just a little bit ridiculous. If they could find rest in a world of lumpy straw, cold toes, and candlelit chores, surely you can find a little peace tonight. So close your eyes, breathe deep, and drift off, safe, warm, and only mildly worried about what tomorrow's laundry might bring. Good night.